Today we're going to be going over optimizations. We want you to think fast. Face count to 15,000, active AIs, shadows, and toggling. So let's get to it. To optimize the face count on your level, what we look at is this middle number right here called total faces. You can see that this level is at 18,500. What we want to do is reduce that to about 15,000 so that it can run on lower end machines and consoles. In this particular scene, we can see a lot of edges and extra things that we don't need that create visual noise for the player and less readability of the building. So one of the things that I'll point out here is this particular center has been extruded, and each of these panels here have been extruded but pushed inward. So now we've got a bunch of faces on the inside here. The other thing that I would point out is we have extra trims right here, causing just like extra face count. All of this is just a ton of extra face count, and the way that the building is sliced up creates a visual noise and clutter. So what we end up doing is going in there and making this one face here down the center, getting rid of these, and using this nice tiling texture down the center, and using the lights here instead of vertically with a bunch of slices in them. We also opt out for all the middle panels to go with one simple single panel down the center, and that creates a nice readability. These are just some of the things that you can do to a building face to just tidy things up, to add more readability to your scene, and to reduce the face count. The next one that I'll point out is one of the first levels in the game, Sacrum. We had this hero building that looked very nice, but the problem with it is the only time the player actually ever saw this face was if they were standing on this rock down here, or if they were up here on the bridge, but they could only see maybe, I think, at this point, because when the bridge comes up, they can only really see this portion of the bridge right here, maybe. So the idea is just to cut down on the clutter, knowing where the player is going to be, how they're going to see something, you can reduce the face count. Now, while this is a hero building and we want it to look very nice, just couldn't get past the fact that the player only sees it maybe for a fraction of a second. And if that, they're in combat and they're not really paying attention here. So what we end up doing is just reducing the face count by quite a lot here, and using some more of those simplified methods of tall vertical slices and big panels. And the end result is still nice. The building still looks great. And yeah. The next one would be these floor trims here. Having a bunch of these little trims doesn't really add too much to the scene. You can still get away with just doing one trim down the center, and it still looks nice. There's also a staircase down here that's got a lot of extra little cuts in it, that just reducing the face count on all of this to like a single face here and a single trim piece here just cleans things up quite nicely. And in the grand scheme of things, the player's not going to notice a difference. It's all going to look a lot more cohesive and easier to read. And the last one I'll go over is this room right here, another one of those edge cases where the player comes through this room and the main flow of the level is to just run this way and out. So they're almost never going to look here unless they're returning to the room for something. And even then, they're mostly just looking down at the ground for items and things that they need. The lighting in this room is also very dark. So just getting rid of these extra trims here and here to reduce the face count by quite a lot, actually, was a big deal. And it's something simple that you can do, and it actually just looks a lot better with the single panel here. Another way that we optimize for performance is by reducing the amount of AIs active at a given time. And the way that we do that is we disable all of our AIs on startup, and we only trigger them when the player needs to fight them. The best way to figure out which AIs are active on the start of your level and to go through and properly hook them up, one of the tricks that we use is we go to Entities, Map Items, and we drop an auto map at the start of the level, and I click play. That'll give me the auto map, and I can use it to see where all of the living AIs are in my level. So when I use the auto map, I can see pretty much all of the AIs in my entire level are on right now. And I want to slowly go through and make sure that I hook up the triggers properly and they only show up when I need them. And reducing this to basically 0 is going to increase the performance of your level a lot. Let's go take a look at what it looks like when you have the final product. So you can see this level has absolutely no AIs on level start. And when we start to move forward, that's when the other AIs start to spawn in. If we go back again, you can see it's only the ones that I need active at this current time. So you can see now we've spawned in additional ones back here, and only the ones that are going to affect the player. These inside this starting area haven't even spawned yet, and they won't spawn until you get further up the road here. They should be spawning in right about now. There. So now they're all in. And we do this for the entire level so that only the ones that are active are the ones that the player's about to engage or could potentially see. The next thing that we do is we optimize our lighting, so to reduce the amount of shadow casters we have in a level. This was touched a bit on in the lighting tutorial, but I'll go ahead and explain a little bit further what that means and how we go about solving it. So first of all, you want to know what lights in your maps cast shadows. One way to do that is to go to the Map Entities tab here and click on Light. And you can just expand this out a little bit more. And then this map has not been optimized, but you can start to see this word shadow next to the light. That lets you know which ones have shadow casting enabled. And you can just scroll down and see all the ones that have shadows on. Now, even though this map isn't optimized, it still has quite a bit of shadow casters. And you want to make sure that you reduce that down. And one of the ways that we tend to do is just, I like to go ahead and hold control and click on all of my shadow casters, just selecting them. And eventually I'll create a new layer in my layers tab called lights. Oh, I actually have some already in here. Lights no shadow and lights shadow approved. And as I go through, I'll just like add all of the lights with shadows to a layer. So I'll just do a new layer right here. Lights with shadows. And I'll just start putting them in here and I'll hide them. And as I go through, I'll make sure that I get all of them. And then when I'm done collecting the entire list of them, I will select them all and kind of just see how closely they exist in proximity to each other. So you can see this yellow cone here is sort of like how they would overlap with each other. When the system goes to do a visual check, all the yellow outlines will cross each other's paths, and that will cause more performance hits the more that they overlap each other. This sphere will cast 6 times, whereas the cone will cast once because it only goes in one direction. So that's something to keep in mind. You always want to have smaller objects. Obviously, these are some pretty big cones here, and they're going to cast across a good portion of the level, and I don't think we really need that. So I would definitely open up the inspector here for this particular light that casts shadows all the way across here, and I would definitely reduce the range maybe to like 10 or something, and then maybe we would up the brightness so it can still cast shadows closer to the walls. And then at the same time, you want to ask yourself if you actually really do need shadows casting and what you can do, because you can still leave that the same size, but just remove the shadow casting checkbox on here will, should be fine. So that's stuff to look out for when you're working, and try and reduce it to, I don't know, less than 20 at least. Closer to 10 would be great. If they're huge, you definitely want them to be in a shorter range so that they're not overlapping each other and it's much better if they're scripted to turn on and off when you need them. The last thing on the list is what we call toggling. And what that refers to is when a mover or a group of functions or scripted entities is on a loop, a continuous loop. And what we like to do is make sure that that's not always on in the level, eating up resources when the player isn't around. So if you have giant fans in your level, maybe those aren't on all the time looping, but they wait for the player to get into the area before they turn on. So that's something to always keep in mind when you start to have things that loop or need to repeat consistently throughout a level. Okay, well, that about does it for the optimizations for now. Remember to think fast. Face count at 15,000, active AIs, shadow lights, and toggling. See you next time.